In November 1316, the crown of France rested on the head of a king who could not walk, could not speak, and would not live long enough to see the end of the week. He was only a few hours old when he became ruler of the most powerful kingdom in Western Europe. 5 days later, he was dead. What happened next would ignite one of the strangest succession crises in medieval history, a political struggle so intense that it changed the rules of monarchy itself. A regent would seize the throne, a princess would lose her birthright, and a decision made in those chaotic days would echo across centuries, eventually helping spark the 100 Years' War. This is the story of the shortest reign in French history, the reign of the 5-day king.
Paris, November 1316. Winter arrived early that year. Cold mist drifted along the Seine and curled between the towers of Notre Dame. The riverbanks were crowded with merchants, priests, soldiers, and travelers who spoke in hushed voices beneath the gray sky. Something was wrong with the kingdom. At the center of Paris, inside the royal palace on the Ile de la Cité, torches burned through the night. Messengers rode in and out of the gates at all hours. Courtiers argued in quiet corners. Because France, the most powerful kingdom in Western Europe, had no king. Or rather, it had a king who had not yet been born. The future ruler of France existed only as a possibility inside the womb of a pregnant queen. And until that child arrived, the fate of the entire kingdom hung in the balance. But when the child finally came into the world, he would reign for only 5 days. And in those 5 days, a regent ruling temporarily for the crown would change the future of the French monarchy forever. The crisis began months earlier. In June of 1316, King Louis X of France died suddenly at the age of 26. To understand why this was such a disaster, we need to understand the dynasty Louis belonged to. For more than 300 years, France had been ruled by the Capetian dynasty. It was one of the most stable royal families in European history. From father to son, the crown had passed smoothly across generations. The system had worked so well that the French monarchy became the strongest political institution in Western Europe. By the early 1300s, the Capetian kings controlled vast lands and commanded enormous authority over their nobles. But that stability depended on one simple thing: a clear male heir. And when Louis X died, he left behind uncertainty. A kingdom haunted by scandal. Louis X had one surviving child, a little girl named Joan. Under normal circumstances, that might have been enough to settle the succession, but these were not normal circumstances. Just 2 years earlier, the French royal court had been shaken by one of the greatest scandals in medieval Europe, the Tour de Nesle affair. 3 daughters-in-law of the previous king, Philip IV, were accused of adultery with knights. The accusations exploded through the royal court like wildfire. One of those women was Louis X's wife, Margaret of Burgundy. She was arrested, publicly humiliated, and imprisoned in a fortress. Margaret eventually confessed to adultery. Soon afterward, she died in prison. Whether she died from illness, harsh conditions, or something more sinister remains unclear. But the scandal left behind a devastating question. If Margaret had been unfaithful, was Joan truly the king's child? or the child of one of her alleged lovers? No definitive proof ever emerged either way, but in medieval politics, doubt could be as powerful as certainty, and many nobles did not want Joan to become queen. Fortunately for the royal dynasty, Louis had remarried shortly before his death. His second wife, Queen Clemencia of Hungary, was pregnant, and if Clemencia gave birth to a boy, that boy would instantly become King of France, even before he could walk, even before he could speak, even before he could open his eyes. So the kingdom entered a strange period of waiting. France had no king, only an unborn possibility. In moments of crisis, someone must hold power, and in 1316, that man was Philippe of Poitiers. He was the younger brother of Louis X. He was intelligent, politically savvy, and experienced in governing territories within the kingdom. Many nobles respected him, but Philippe's position was complicated. He could not claim the throne while the queen was pregnant. Doing so risked rebellion and accusations of usurpation. So instead, Philippe assumed the role of regent. In theory, this meant he was only a temporary caretaker. He would govern France until the queen gave birth. Then the crown would pass to the rightful heir. But even temporary power can be dangerous, because once someone holds authority over a kingdom, it becomes much easier to imagine keeping it. The regency period was tense. France's nobles were divided. Some supported Joan, the daughter of Louis X. Others believed the crown should pass only to male heirs. Still others were simply waiting to see what Philippe would do. Meanwhile, the kingdom faced real dangers. England watched closely across the Channel. Powerful French lords could exploit instability to challenge royal authority, and medieval succession crises often ended in civil war. Philippe understood this, so he moved quickly to consolidate control. He secured loyalty from important bishops. He strengthened alliances among the nobility. He took control of the royal treasury and administrative machinery. Publicly, he presented himself as the loyal guardian of the crown. Privately, he positioned himself as the kingdom's indispensable leader. Everything now depended on the queen's child. On November 15, 1316, the waiting ended. Queen Clemencia went into labor. Inside the royal palace, attendants rushed through candlelit corridors. Midwives prepared the chamber. Nobles gathered nearby, anxious for news, because the child's gender would determine the future of France. Finally, the announcement came. The queen had given birth to a boy. At that exact moment, the newborn king became King John of France. Technically, he was king the second he entered the world. Philippe of Poitiers, the regent, now ruled in the name of an infant monarch. The kingdom had a king, but he was less than an hour old. The reign of John I would be one of the shortest in history. Almost immediately, the newborn king appeared fragile. This was not unusual. In medieval Europe, infant mortality was tragically common. Many babies, even royal ones, did not survive their first weeks. Still, the court hoped the child would grow stronger. But he didn't. 5 days after his birth, the king died. John I's reign had lasted less than a week. The French crown was once again without a ruler. And now, the real struggle for power began. Two potential claimants now stood before the kingdom. First, Joan, the daughter of Louis X. Second, Philippe of Poitiers, the regent. On paper, Joan seemed the natural heir, but Philippe had an argument, a powerful one. He claimed that women could not inherit the French throne, and neither could their descendants. This principle would later be known as Salic law, but in 1316 it was a political argument, not yet a fixed legal rule. Philippe's supporters claimed that ancient Frankish traditions prevented women from ruling France. Historians today believe this interpretation was selectively emphasized to justify Philippe's claim. In other words, the law was being shaped in real time. Joan's supporters tried to defend her rights, but they faced two serious problems. First, the lingering suspicion surrounding her legitimacy. Second, Joan was still a child. France had just experienced the chaos of a king who lived only 5 days. Many nobles feared another unstable minority rule. Philippe, by contrast, was an adult with political experience. Gradually, support shifted towards him, not necessarily because everyone believed his legal argument, but because many believed he could keep the kingdom stable. In January 1317, Philippe moved decisively. He summoned the estates and leading nobles of the kingdom. He secured their recognition, and he was crowned King Philip V of France. Joan's claim was set aside. The precedent had been established. Women were excluded from the French royal succession, and this decision would echo through centuries of European history.
Almost immediately, rumors began circulating. Some people wondered whether the infant king's death had been natural or arranged. After all, the regent had become king almost immediately afterward, and the newborn's death had conveniently cleared the path. But historians today emphasize that there is no solid evidence that John I was murdered. Infant mortality was extremely common in the medieval world, even among royal families. The poisoning theory remains speculation. Still, the timing certainly raised eyebrows. Philip V ruled France for 6 years. His reign was generally considered competent. He improved financial administration, strengthened royal authority, and attempted legal reforms. But history has a strange sense of irony. Philip himself produced no surviving sons. When he died in 1322, the crown passed to his brother, Charles IV. And when Charles died without a male heir in 1328, the Capetian dynasty ended. The throne passed to the Valois branch of the royal family. But another king now made a claim, the King of England. Edward III of England argued that he had a legitimate claim to the French throne. Why? Because his mother was a French princess. But the French rejected the claim, citing the very principle reinforced during Philip's rise in 1316. Women could not transmit the crown. This dispute became one of the causes of the 100 Years' War, a conflict that would reshape Europe for generations. So when we look back at November 1316, we see something extraordinary. A newborn king who ruled for 5 days, a regent who ruled temporarily for 6, and a succession crisis that changed the rules of monarchy. Because sometimes history doesn't turn on long wars or great battles. Sometimes it turns on the fragile life of a single child. 5 days long, yet powerful enough to reshape the future of a kingdom.
If you enjoy cinematic deep dives into the strange moments that changed history, forgotten rulers, hidden political battles, and the stories behind the crown, make sure to subscribe, because sometimes the shortest reigns leave the longest shadows.